You had the Shanghai, our membership of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You've had bilaterally a lot of migration mobility agreements. You had the FIPIC platform. You had the Nordics format. You had our entry into export control regimes, because clearly our presence there has a additional value to their effectiveness. If I were to pick another facet, I would say we are also today narrative shapers. And perhaps the most effective example of that is the rush, I would say almost the pressure that we have each time Raisina dialogue is held. That today the people want to listen to India, they want to be seen with India, they do feel that working with us expands and sharpens their own influence as well. But it's not just a conference, it's also an important subject. You can see it on climate change. You could see it when PM went to Glasgow or to Paris. You can see it in counter-terrorism. The fact that the no money for terror actually got so much more traction after it was held in India. You can see it in a concept, how rapidly Indo-Pacific and Quad have taken root in the global strategic lexicon. You can see it in something like LIFE, which Prime Minister and UN Secretary General initiated last October. Or you could see it just in culture. In fact, Meenakshi ji was, every time she goes to Central Asia, and she was talking to me about her experience to Uzbekistan, that the impact today we are making, because we are proud of our traditions, others also are feeling that and wanting to absorb that in different ways. And they celebrate it along with us. Now, that picture which I put to you obviously has to be underpinned by politics. And here I think the last few years, if anything, have only underlined India's credentials, India's standing, India's DNA, I would say almost, as an independent force. Now, you're all aware of the debates in the last year about Ukraine and various ramifications. That's one example, I would say, of where we were clear from the very start about taking an independent stance, not just on the conflict itself, but on the various ramifications of that conflict. But I could share with you other examples. The Quad. Do remember, the Quad was first an idea which came about in 2007. And then in 2008, everybody buckled to pressure. 10 years later, when this time around we were doing Quad, it was not that there wasn't pressure. It was just that we didn't bend. So Quad too is an example of our independence, as indeed is the voice of Global South. We are the first G20 president who have actually made an effort to consult other people. And 125 countries responded because they believed we are an independent voice. So when I say, how does the world look at us? There can be no bigger endorsement of our standing than the manner in which 125 countries responded during the Voice of Global South. But it can also be on the ground. When we stand up on our northern borders vis-a-vis China, when we take a clear stand on Belt and Road, those two are examples of our independence. That we are not swayed by either coercion or by inducements or by false narratives. So the facets of how the world looks at us obviously also is influenced by, to some extent, how we look after our own people. And during COVID, a lot of countries left their nationals to fend for themselves. I think we were the other extreme. No other country did as much as we did. We brought back directly during COVID itself at least 70 lakh people who in some way had been stranded or were compelled to come back to India. We also have, in these 9 years, created the systems for it. So there are systems for people to come back, but there are also systems to support them when they are abroad. So if Indians are in distress, the Indian Community Welfare Fund, the expansion of it and the repurposing of it, I think, was very, very useful during this COVID. And of course, most of all, you have seen these repeated operations. I mean, somehow it has happened from 2014. Almost every year, I mean, it's a reflection of the state of the world, that almost every year we have had to undertake some operation somewhere. It's a reflection of the world, but it's also a reflection of the globalization of India, that our people, I mean, I'm sure many of you would not have anticipated that we would have 5,000 nationals in Sudan, or that we had 20,000 students in Ukraine, or that we would have people stuck in South Sudan, or even in Afghanistan as Kabul was falling. So I would say, it's one thing, of course, and I'll come to that, what difference it makes to our citizens. But I must also tell you, the world watches us. I mean, what we did in Ukraine was the subject of numerous conversations with my counterparts, and I've heard, people, presidents and prime ministers also speak to our own prime minister in that regard. But while we look after our own, we also take pride, and I think the world recognizes that we are genuinely international. We are international, and that is exhibited in what we are doing on climate action, what, as I said, we did on vaccines through Vaccine Maitri and through supply of medicines. What we are doing in terms of food, the millets, again, Namibia, they were very interested in working with us on production and expanding production and consumption of millets, or on counterterrorism, or on creating more reliable and resilient supply chains. First responder certainly highlights our credentials, or on maritime security. So if you look at the activities of India in different domains, yes, there is a strong sense this is a country today determined to look after the interests, its interests, the welfare of its people, but it is also a government very much committed to international, to global good, to internationalism. And I think that message too, it resonates particularly strongly in the South, but I think not only in the South. I think much of the world today appreciates it, and they actually see us in a way as a force of good. But while I speak about all of this, I think what really fascinates the world today is actually not what we are only doing in foreign policy. It is what we are doing in domestic policy. It is actually the huge domestic transformation, especially how we have today used the digital medium for the delivery of public goods and services. How we are today really transforming Indian society in terms of social development goals, the literacy missions, the gender effort, the Jal Jeevan mission, the electricity connections, the Swachh Bharat. I think these are today, and these are today, clearly for a lot of developing countries, this is an exemplar. But it's not, again, only developing countries. There are countries who actually look at it in terms of, one country, for example, which showed a lot of interest on the digital, on UPI, was Singapore. And already Singapore, I was told, more than $1 billion have come through the UPI system to India. Japan was very interested in UPI. When people looked today at the India stack, and if I were to move to the technology area, at what we are doing on 4G, 5G, that interest is not just in the developing world, it's also equally in the developed world. So the domestic progress, I would say, that too has made, not that too, I would say that most of all, has made actually a huge impact on the thinking of the world. So after 9 years, I can really say without hesitation that in terms of our standing, in terms of where we are in global consciousness, it is something very much deeper than before. Now, let me say a few words about how the average citizen has benefited. I think to start with, the average citizen has seen enhanced security. If I were to start in the east, the land boundary agreement with Bangladesh particularly has had a transformational impact on the northeast. It has allowed progress. It has allowed, in fact, not just better law and order and stability in northeast, but also given northeast a connectivity through Bangladesh in this improved climate. The fact that I think we are countering Chinese actions on the northern borders, I think, has also enhanced security, as indeed the fact that we have delegitimized terrorism from across the Pakistani border. So today, I would say the activities of Indian diplomacy clearly have made the nation more secure. But they have also made the nation much more stronger economically. And again, I can cite to you different metrics for measuring that. It could be in greater exports, in bigger FDI flows, in stronger technology collaborations, in today in softening oil prices. Because had our diplomacy not done its work, I think it would have had an impact on the petrol pump. In fertilizer costs, that, you know, given how big, I mean, fertilizer is one of our key imports. So working with our counterparts there, we have actually stabilized the market and reached long-term agreements which definitely benefit the country and benefit Indian farmers. And between fertilizer, oil costs, I think it has an impact on inflation as well. And regionally, I would say particularly Northeast, I think economic activity in Northeast has definitely benefited from what Indian diplomacy has delivered. But another area where I think the common citizen has benefited is actually in greater mobility and greater opportunity abroad. I have spoken about the mobility agreements that we've done. We've done it now with a number of countries, with Portugal, with UK, just done with Germany, Austria, Australia. And where our workers or professionals go abroad, I think we have today much better systems for their welfare as well. And it's particularly important, as Mulliji will tell you, in the Gulf, where actually you know, the working conditions of people who go are much better as a result of agreements we've concluded. But underlying all of this is actually a great public service revolution we have done, and that is in the field of passports. In 2014, there were 77 passport seva kendras in the country. Since then, we added 16 passport seva lagu kendras and 430 passport seva kendras located in post offices. So essentially what was below 100 today is in excess of 500. And the convenience to people, because, you know, we who live in cities still do not understand how hard it is just to get to a passport seva kendra. So the fact that we have made the passport kendra, the servicing center, the collection center, the delivery center, so much more widely distributed in this country, that has had a huge impact. And if you look at passport figures, we were issuing less than 9 million passports, 8.7 actually, in 2014. Today we are issuing more than 14 million passports. And one of the only reason we are doing 14 is that you know, we have to ramp up the capability, and actually the faster we process it, we are very confident this demand will keep going up. And one part of it is we are making it easier to get passports. I mean, I think your personal experiences would tell you that it has actually, the speed at which you get it is significantly better than what it was a decade ago. But it's also happened abroad, because remember, we render more than 1 million passport services out of the country. And out of the country before, the time period was enormous because you had to go through a cumbersome process of checking. Today, actually, because there is a database called GPSP, that it is possible, and 181 embassies and consulates are connected. There are a few who still have to be done. But even replacement or renewal of passports abroad has become very much easier. So whether it is the ability to travel abroad, the mobility agreements, the totalization issues we are pushing, the specialized skilled workers which we are giving access to, I think these today have been a change. A fourth area, of course, is in technology capabilities. And I think the more we collaborate globally in technology, it could be G2G, it could be B2B, it could be G2B, it could be best practices, it could be projects. So the combination of all of this, you can see there's a very conscious drive for technology upgrades, and that is today actually opening many new opportunities for the youth, especially for the youth of this country. The fourth is, of course, security abroad. I have spoken about multiple operations. The Indian, Community Welfare Fund, the consular services, even something like students. Today, students know that whether it is their, their legitimate case for working hours or other difficulties that they face, sometimes even security issues, that the government of India will back them up, and back them up perhaps in a manner in which we didn't do before. And finally, I would say there is a cultural respect for us today. There is a cultural respect, and there are a variety of reasons for it. Part of it is also that we ourselves have globalized many of our practices. I think the International Day of Yoga is not just a shared celebration. I think it's also a shared understanding of what is happening in India. And that is extending to other fields, could be Ayurveda, it could be, in a way, our way of life. So anybody going out today, I think an Indian going out today is more likely to be, in a sense, understood by the rest of the world. And all of this, I'm not suggesting, is only due to government efforts. I think there are a lot of other independent processes in play. But certainly, we help to guide it, channel it, encourage it. So if this is the picture I present to you, I would like to end very briefly with my sense of what has changed in 9 years. Why has this happened? I think it has happened, first of all, because where foreign policy is concerned, starting from day one, when you saw the leaders of our neighbors present at the oath-taking of the Council of Ministers in 2014, starting from day one till now, there has been strategic clarity. There has been strategic clarity in terms of understanding the world, in organizing ourselves into, a neighborhood first circle, extended neighborhoods, the Sagar, Africa beyond, the major powers. So how we perceive the world and how we interact with the world and how we develop policies for each of those and for combinations of these, I think that is to me a number one reason. And along with that, in this phrase which has been used, hesitations of history, that we are no longer a prisoner of our past. That if there are gains to the country, if there are benefits for our citizens, we are not held back because of ideological reservations. Along with that, I would say the strategic communication, that we are able, probably if you look at us, I would say not only us ministers, but even the secretaries or probably my colleagues who are in different MEA buildings, we are far more intensely active and interactive than those before us. I'm not in any way disrespecting those people. I think it is partly the situation. It is the big picture which is also, it is also the greater interest. The fact that the world wants to deal more with us. But what it has done is this dynamic of our capabilities and change, the world's interest, then our response, I think it has created today a virtuous cycle in diplomacy, which is part of this change. The third reason is a confidence in handling multipolarity and multi-alignment. Because one of the dilemmas, long-standing dilemmas for Indian foreign policy is, if the world is polarized or there are multiple centers of power, how do you deal with all of them? And I would suggest to you that we have done it, especially in the last 9 years, with a great deal of confidence, with results to show for it. And if you look at the major power centers, with the exception of China, for reasons which all of you are aware, I would say almost every one of these accounts has progressed, some of them in actually very challenging circumstances. A fourth reason is actually what has changed is the delivery focus. That it isn't just that you go declare something and then let it happen in its own speed, and sometimes they never happen. The sense within the government that there has to be delivery, there has to be timeline, there has to be budget, and this is backed up by monitoring. So, within the government, there is a very famous exercise called Pragati. And this Pragati model, which Prime Minister himself started and which we have departmentalized internally as well, that we keep drilling down to see why is a project stuck, why is something not moved, where are our promises, what has been delivered, what is still pending. So the whole delivery monitoring, I think, aspect, that has been, if you ask me, one of the hallmarks really of the Modi government's administrative style. The fourth is, of course, what I said, the people-centric view. Improving passports could have happened earlier if people felt it was important, if you actually put citizens at the center. Worrying about people abroad, there could be tourists, there could be seafarers, there could be students. Why, in a way you could ask yourself, why are we doing these operations year after year? Why do we battle for our students? Why do we push embassies to give visas? Why are we strengthening passport system? Because at the end of the day, I think this people-centric view of governance, of responsibility, which includes obviously diplomacy and foreign policy, I think that is something which has been part of the change. I would also say there's a greater pride in the country. There's a stronger belief in our culture, heritage, civilization. That has certainly, if our self-belief is stronger, certainly the world looks at you with greater respect. And as I said, at the end of the day, there is an international outlook which the Modi government has brought to bear, and that certainly boosted international cooperation. So the picture, and I'd conclude with that, the picture that I really present to you is at home a much greater, I would say, sensitivity to people's needs, a conscious effort to associate them with foreign policy. And you can see that most of all in the manner in which we are marking the G20 presidency, the Jan Bhagidari approach, which is quite unique in our diplomatic annals, I think in many ways reflects the Modi government's approach. But you can see it abroad. You all know that in the next few days, Prime Minister Modi would be undertaking what is only the third state visit. And he would be the first Indian leader to address the US Congress twice. The month after that, he's going as the chief guest on Bastille Day, I think July 14th. You saw the welcome, the respect that he got in Papua New Guinea, or the welcome that he got in Australia. I spoke to you about the responses of the Global South and the Voice of Global Summit, of the Global South Summit. So I think in all objectivity, the report card of the Indian foreign policy of the last 9 years under the Modi government is a very solid report card. It is a report card not just in terms of respect and outcomes. It is also a report card which tells every Indian citizen that they are more secure traveling abroad, that we have their back. Tells every citizen that foreign policy at the end of the day is purposed for their benefit, for their welfare, with their interests at heart. And that is really the report card that we would like to put before the nation today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, sir. Before we take questions, let me let out the ground rules. Because of time constraints, we'll only take one question per person. I see lots of hands. Patience, please. Please introduce yourself as well as the organization that you represent, and we'll take questions in groups of 3. Maybe I'll start with the lady there. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. This is Yeshi Seli from the New Indian Express. So the fate of 700 Indian students studying in Canada is under limbo, and they are probably going to be deported on June the 13th Is there something that the government is likely to do? And in addition, there was this procession which was taken out in Brampton yesterday where they were glorifying the assassination of late Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. So is there anything that government?
May I also request to limit to one question per person? Yeah, okay, yeah, please.
मैं सर ब्रह्म प्रकाश दुबे हूँ मंत्री जी, ब्रह्म प्रकाश दुबे हूँ जी न्यूज़ से। मेरा सवाल ये है कि आपने 9 साल का रिपोर्ट कार्ड बताया, लेकिन राहुल गांधी हाल ही में ब्रिटेन गए, अमेरिका गए, वो कह रहे हैं भारत में सारी लोकतांत्रिक संस्थाएं नष्ट हो रही हैं, भारत में क्या क्या लोकतंत्र नष्ट हो रहा है। तो इससे विदेश मंत्रालय को विदेशों में समझाने में चुनौती बढ़ गई है, या आपको लगता है राहुल गांधी को वहाँ कोई सीरियस नहीं लेता? थैंक यू।
आपको Yeah, go ahead. Abhishek.
Sir, this is Abhishek Kapoor from Republic TV. Since you will be taking some questions from the United States, Kurt Campbell, senior White House officer, official said India-US relationship is going to see escape velocity getting in between the two. And since you mentioned it, I'm just taking this, if you can take this question. You mentioned except for China, we have done well everywhere else. If you could elaborate, sir.
So, more questions, or perhaps hand over 3? Yeah, 3, sir. We'll leave it at that.
So let me start with Canada. For some time now, there is this case of students who the Canadians say did not study in the college which they should have studied, and when they applied for a work permit, they got into difficulties. From the very start, we, meaning the Foreign Ministry here, as well as our High Commission and the consulates in Canada, have taken up their case. And our point is that, look, the students studied in good faith. If there were people who misled them, the culpable parties should be acted against. It is unfair to punish a student who undertook their education in good faith. So the latest report that I got, in fact only this morning, was that I think yesterday the Canadian Prime Minister also kind of made a statement in the House of Commons there, and the Minister also tweeted something, and they have also been talking to our High Commission out there. I think the Canadians also accept that, it would be unfair. I mean, if a student has done no wrong, and I don't know if all the cases are the same. I mean, there is a granularity about it which, sitting at this distance, neither you or I can judge. If if a student has done no wrong, they accept the idea that they have to find some solution for it. So we will continue to press, and I would very much hope that the Canadian system is fair in that regard. Regarding this float issue used, let me actually answer it, because I think there's a bigger issue involved. And the bigger issue involved is really the space that Canada has continuously, and frankly, to us, we are at a loss to understand, other than the requirements of vote bank politics, why anybody would do this. Because if you look at their history, I mean, you would imagine that they learn by the history and they wouldn't like to repeat that history. So it isn't only one incident, however egregious it may be. I think there is a larger underlying issue about the space which is given to separatists, to extremists, to people who advocate violence. And I think it's not good for the relationship, and I think it's not good for Canada. जो आपका जो सवाल था वो राहुल गांधी वाला, देखिए, उनकी आदत है कि वो जब बाहर जाते हैं कि वो देश की आलोचना करते हैं, हमारी राजनीति के बारे में टिप्पणी करते हैं। पर जो आपका प्रश्न है कि दूसरों पे इसका क्या असर पड़ता है, अब दुनिया हमें देख रही है, और दुनिया क्या देख रही है? दुनिया देख रही है कि इस देश में चुनाव होते हैं, चुनाव में कभी एक पार्टी जीतती है, कभी दूसरी पार्टी जीतती है। तो अगर देश में डेमोक्रेसी नहीं है तो ये ऐसा परिवर्तन तो आना नहीं चाहिए ना। हर चुनाव का रिजल्ट एक ही होना चाहिए। वैसे 24 का चुनाव रिजल्ट तो वही होगा, हमें पता है, हाँ। पर अगर आप देखें जो ये पूरा नैरेटिव जो है, ये हमारे यहाँ एक देश में नैरेटिव बना है, और जब ये नैरेटिव देश में नहीं चलता या कम चलता है तो इसको बाहर ले जाते हैं, और उनकी अपेक्षा है कि बाहर का सपोर्ट जो है वो देश में चलेगा। मुझे लगता है कि यहाँ आम नागरिक जो है, जो देखिए हमारे यहाँ जितनी भी आप बीच में, हमारे यहाँ डेमोक्रेसी है, आपका कुछ भी होगा, मेरा कुछ भी होगा, आपकी पॉलिटिक्स कुछ होगी, हमारी कुछ होगी, हमें देश में जो करें मुझे इसमें कोई इतराज़ नहीं, पर मुझे नहीं लगता कि बाहर जाके देश की पॉलिटिक्स को बाहर ले जाना देश के हित में नहीं, और मुझे नहीं लगता कि उनकी क्रेडिबिलिटी उसके कारण बढ़ेगी। द क्वेश्चन चाइना, look, I said our relationship with all the major power centers, you can say, have evolved, because that is the record. I mean, you look at the US, look at Russia, even in these, with all these challenges, look at UK, France, look at EU, Germany, Japan, or if you take regions, Gulf, ASEAN, each one of these have advanced. And why have they advanced? They didn't advance by gravity and by nature. They advanced because people worked very hard. That in each of these relationships, actually the Modi government has striven, it has put in place policies. The Prime Minister himself has sort of led the diplomatic efforts from the front. That we have tried to find areas of agreement, of collaboration, of working together with these countries. We have tried to expand the economic base, the technology base, tried to find security partners, and we have been largely successful. Now, why the exception? Well, in a sense, that answer can only be given by China, because China consciously, for some reason, chose in 2020 to, breaking agreements to move forces to the border areas and, seek to coerce us. So I think, it's been made very clear to them that until there is peace and tranquility in the border areas, our relationship cannot progress. So that is the obstacle which is holding that back.
Thank you, sir.
सर, मैं मनीष झा हूँ, TV9 भारतवर्ष से। सर इधर। सर, मेरा सवाल ये है कि रूस यूक्रेन युद्ध में इंडिया का स्टैंड और आपके जो स्टेटमेंट हैं वो बहुत सारे जो दूसरे देश हैं उनके डिप्लोमेट्स ने भी काफ़ी सराहा, उन लोगों ने भी काफ़ी अप्रिशिएट किया कि आपने जिस तरह से स्टैंड लिया, चाहे वो यूरोपियन प्लेटफॉर्म पर भी। लेकिन सबसे बड़ी चिंता ये है कि इस युद्ध की वजह से चाइना का बहुत ज़्यादा रूस के साथ रिलेशन स्ट्रांग हो गया है। कल ही उसके आर्मर्ड व्हीकल रूस में दिखाई दिए हैं, इससे पहले ड्रोन वगैरह आ रहे थे, इकोनॉमी में काफ़ी इन्वॉल्वमेंट हो गई है। तो वैसे स्थिति में आपको नहीं लगता है कि कल के दिन में भारत और रूस का रिलेशन पर प्रभाव पड़ेगा, खास करके तब जब हम क्वाड में भी उतना ही एक्टिव हैं? तो कैसे इसको आप न्यूट्रलाइज करेंगे? थैंक यू।
सर, प्रणय उपाध्याय, एबीपी न्यूज़ से। सर, मेरा सवाल इस चीज़ को लेकर है कि आपने 2014 के अंदर इस चीज़ के साथ शुरुआत की कि पड़ोसियों को साथ लिया जाए, नेबरहुड फर्स्ट की पॉलिसी के साथ। भारत की नेबरहुड के अंदर चाइना और पाकिस्तान, दो नेबर्स के साथ में रिलेशन डिफिकल्ट रही है। आप नेबरहुड पॉलिसी के लिए किन को फॉल्ट लाइन मानते हैं और कहाँ पर आपको लगता है कि जो आपके एरियाज ऑफ चैलेंज हैं जिसके ऊपर आप काम करना चाहेंगे?
संजय।
Sir, times now. You spoke about the northern border. You mentioned what happened in 2020. You said that unless there is a change from Beijing's side, you cannot, unless there is peace and tranquility, the relationship cannot move forward. But as of now, what do you see happening in the sense, do you see any kind of meetings between strategic representatives? Do you see any attempt by China at de-escalation, which comes after disengagement? There are too little bits of disengagement still left. What is the future, sir?
आपका जो पहला सवाल जो था यूक्रेन के बारे में, जो सवाल जो था, देखिए जो यूक्रेन में जो युद्ध जो चल रहा है उसके अलग अलग जो दुनिया उसका असर जो दुनिया पर है, ये अलग अलग रीजन्स में, अलग अलग देशों में उसका अपना प्रभाव होता है। अब रशिया और किसी और देश, चाइना हो या कोई और देश हो, अब उनके रिश्ते और नज़दीकी होंगे या दूर के होंगे, वो खुद तय करेंगे। हमारा रिश्ता जो रशिया के साथ अगर आप देखें, 1955 के बाद जब क्रुश्चेव और बुल्गेरियन आए थे यहाँ, जब वीटो पहली बार उन्होंने यूनाइटेड नेशंस में भारत का समर्थन किया था, उस टाइम हमारे रिश्ते जो हैं वो बहुत ही स्टडी रहे। और इस दौरान दुनिया में बहुत बड़े परिवर्तन आए। माने सोवियत संघ टूट चुका था, कोल्ड वॉर आया, कोल्ड वॉर गया, यूनिपोलर आया, वो भी गया, यूरोप यूनिफाई हुआ। और आपस में अगर देखें रशिया चाइना के रिलेशंस, रशिया यूएस के, रशिया यूरोप के, इन सब संबंधों में माने कहीं अप और डाउन होता रहा। हमारे संबंध जो हैं बहुत ही स्टडी रहे हैं। और इसके कारण हैं क्योंकि एक दोनों देशों में एक तो लीडरशिप इसकी जो महत्व को समझती है, पब्लिक सेंटिमेंट भी साथ देती है। हम दोनों के यहाँ ये समझ है कि हम दोनों बड़े यूरेशियन देश हैं, पूरा यूरेशिया की स्टेबिलिटी एक किस्म से हम पे निर्भर है, हमारे रिश्तों पे निर्भर। तो जो आप कह रहे हैं, हाँ ऐसी एनालिसिस मैं पढ़ता रहता हूँ, पर आप हकीकत देखें ना कि हमने पिछले साल में भी ऐसा कुछ रिश्तों को ऐसा कुछ होने नहीं दिया जिसके कारण कुछ प्रश्न चिन्ह उठे हमारे बारे में। तो ये मेरा उत्तर है आपके लिए। दूसरा जो है नेबरहुड फर्स्ट जो आप पूछ रहे थे, जो रिपोर्ट कार्ड मैंने आप लोगों के सामने प्रस्तुत किया है, उसमें सबसे ज़्यादा अगर आप देखें, सबसे हमारी प्रगति भी नेबरहुड में हुई है, हमारी चुनौतियां भी नेबरहुड में, तो दोनों हैं साथ साथ। कि बाकी नेबर्स के साथ नेपाल, बांग्लादेश, मालदीव, श्रीलंका, भूटान, इवन म्यांमार, आप देखें पॉलिटिकल रिलेशंस आर स्ट्रॉन्ग, रीजनल कनेक्टिविटी, माने एक किस्म से एक रीजनल, एक पहली बार यहाँ एक रीजनल इकोनॉमी बन रही। क्योंकि जब एक देश से दूसरे देश पेट्रोल जाता है, बिजली जाती है, सड़कें जाती हैं, रेलगाड़ियाँ जाती हैं, आज जो हैं हम बांग्लादेश के बंदरगाहों के उपयोग कर सकते हैं, जो एक बहुत बड़ी नई बात। तो एक लेवल पे मैं कहूँगा प्रोग्रेस रिपोर्ट में बहुत सफलता मैं आपको दिखा सकता हूँ, पर जहाँ चुनौती हैं, एक तो पाकिस्तान के साथ है, और ये माने ये कोई नया विषय नहीं है, शुरू से ये क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म माने उसकी चुनौती थी। और फ़र्क ये है कि हम जो हैं इसको बर्दाश्त करने के लिए तैयार नहीं हैं। तो या तो आप कहें कि नेबरहुड फर्स्ट के कारण हम टेररिज्म को साइड में रखें और पाकिस्तान के साथ कोऑपरेशन बढ़ाते जाएं, ये ना तो देश की सेंटिमेंट है, ना मोदी गवर्नमेंट की सोच है। तो इसमें अगर पाकिस्तान रिश्तों को आगे ले जाना चाहता है, उनको पता है क्या करना है, इसमें कोई माने उनको पता है, दुनिया को पता है। और जो चाइना का जो है, जैसे मैंने अभी उनको समझाया, हमारी कोशिश थी कि चाइना के साथ, हमारे पड़ोसी हैं, देश के सबसे बड़े इकोनॉमी हैं, और हम तो चाहेंगे कि रिश्ते अच्छे हों, पर रिश्ते तभी अच्छे हो सकते हैं जब बॉर्डर एरिया में पीस और ट्रैंक्विलिटी हो, और जब कोई अग्रीमेंट हो तो उसका पालन होना चाहिए। तो अगर अग्रीमेंट का उल्लंघन हुआ और आपने पीस और ट्रैंक्विलिटी को कहीं छोड़ दिया, तो आप ही बताइए कि रिश्तों को कैसे आगे ले जाएं। तो चाइना के साथ जो टाइम्स नाउ का सवाल जो है, सी वी आर टॉकिंग, it is not that communications have broken down. So Sanjay, I'm responding to you. So the point is that with China, in fact, even on the day, even before Galwan happened, we were, talking to the Chinese, saying that, look, we are seeing movements of your forces, which in our view is violative of our understanding. The day after Galwan happened, in fact, the morning after, I actually spoke to my counterpart. And since then we have engaged, the military commanders have engaged, our embassies have engaged, I have engaged with my counterpart, and I continue to do that. When Foreign Minister Chingang was here in Goa, we had a long discussion. Even when I was in BRICS, he did not come, his deputy came. We had a chat on the side. Look, we have to, the two of us have to find a way of disengaging, because I don't believe that this present impasse serves China's interest either. The fact is the relationship is impacted. And the relationship will continue to be impacted. If there is any expectation that somehow we will normalize while the border situation is not normal, that's not a well-founded expectation. So your question, what do you, what can we expect? Look, at multilateral events, we will, obviously the Chinese are there and we are there, it is likely that we would, there would be a conversation between us. Bilaterally, I mean, since Galwan happened, we've had one visit by Mr. Wang Yi to India. But I think the main mechanisms, we have a mechanism called WMCC, and we have a mechanism called Senior High-Level Commanders Meeting. One, one is a kind of military-led with MEA in it, the other is MEA-led with military in it. These mechanisms continue to do the work, because at the end of the day, disengagement is a very detailed process. It's not something which is a kind of obviously you have to have a leadership level buy-in, but the details of it have to be worked out by people on the ground. So I think all of this would continue to happen.
Let's talk about a multi-bagger stock that has delivered over 1200% return in the last 2 years. Well, this stock has almost tripled investors' wealth in the last 1 year period. Well, I'm talking about Brahma Steel Tubes. The company is engaged in the steel pipes and tubes industry with an installed capacity of 264,000 metric tons per annum. The company's clients include BSES, Rajdhani Power, Gujarat Gas and UPCL, among others. Now, shares of this metal company